I don't doubt the aspirations of all parents in relation to their children. But I mean all parents. What we've been able to do is to make sure we release the funding to ensure that our state secondary schools have the teachers they need. And there's no point the party opposite pretending that they're interested in state education when they left them without the teaching they needed.
Dr. Reid Jegball.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You may never have witnessed a moment like this before. Recently, in the British Parliament, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, found himself openly embarrassed and called a liar by members of Parliament, MPs. This happened after he made an outrageous statement, one so far-fetched that no one in the room could have imagined he would say it. What was the statement? Well, Starmer told a lie so audacious that MPs were left in shock and disbelief. The reaction was immediate. Even the Speaker of the House was forced to intervene, creating a tense atmosphere as Starmer worried about what consequences he might face. But what did Starmer say to cause such a reaction? And why did this moment reveal something about his character that shocked the nation? Let's take a closer look at the full story.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. St Hilda's Girls' School looks set to join Emmanuel Jewish Prep as the second school in Bushey alone forced to close because of Labour's VAT hike. This is a double hit to aspiration. First, the parents, many of whom not wealthy, who have described the significant sacrifices they have made to send their children to these schools. And secondly, to the excellent local state schools, including the one that I attended, which simply do not have the places, meaning this policy won't even save money. So may I therefore urge the Prime Minister, even at this late stage, to look again at the failures in this policy.
Politicians often tell lies, but some are so unbelievable and shameless that they leave people stunned. The lie told by Keir Starmer in the British Parliament was exactly one of those moments. People were left dumbfounded by the boldness of his claim. It happened during a debate on Starmer's proposal to add a tax on private school fees. Even before Starmer made his statement in the House of Commons, a private school in his own constituency had already announced that it would close its doors. The Village School for Girls, located in Camden and within Starmer's constituency, made the decision to shut down, and it blamed the new VAT value-added tax policy introduced by Labour, which Starmer leads. The school pointed to the increased tax burden and rising national insurance costs as the main reason it could no longer sustain its operations. It wasn't just one school that suffered. In fact, 12 private schools had already closed down, and there was evidence showing that many more were likely to follow suit.
I was a scholarship boy at my school and very proud of it, and I have to ask, what kind of a politician is it that sets out to make it more difficult for schools to offer exactly the kind of scholarships and bursaries that gave him such a crucial leg up in life? And the answer, of course, is Keir Starmer and the opportunity-destroying, aspiration-hating Labour Party. Read about it in my column in the Daily Mail.
Reports indicated that at least 77 independent schools in England had closed since the Labour Party first proposed the VAT tax, and the closures were expected to continue. Many of these schools were small or medium-sized and located outside London or in regions less wealthy than the capital. As these schools shut down, students were displaced and forced to seek places in already overcrowded state schools. The knock-on effect was clear. Not only were private school students now being pushed into a strained public education system, but the additional pressure was creating more competition for places in the top-performing state schools. Parents who had saved up to send their children to private schools now had to fight for a spot in the state schools, which had limited availability. The result was larger class sizes, fewer resources, and more inequality. When Labour first introduced the VAT policy, they promised that it would raise £1.8 billion, money that would supposedly be used to hire more teachers and improve state schools. On paper, this sounded like a good plan. However, in practice, it was clear that the policy had unintended consequences.
the Prime Minister's decision to impose VAT on independent schools strips hard-working families of the choice for what is best for their children, while risking job losses for teachers, increasing class sizes, and squeezing state school resources to their absolute limit. With these impending threats, what actions is the Prime Minister taking to mitigate these effects if he is not undertaking an impact assessment to understand them?
Look, I do understand that many parents across the country save hard to be able to send their children to private school because they have aspiration for their children. So does every parent who sends their children to a state school. And the problem we have is we don't have enough teachers in key subjects in our state secondary school. Now, the party opposite may be prepared to tolerate that. I'm not. And that's why we've made this change to fund 6,500 teachers.
Rather than improving state schools, the forced closure of private schools only added more stress to the already struggling system. With private schools closing, thousands of teachers lost their jobs, and the state schools could not hire them quickly enough to accommodate the sudden influx of new students. Instead of helping working-class families, the policy was pushing even more students into overcrowded classrooms, making the situation worse for everyone involved. What made this even more infuriating was Starmer's personal background. When asked about his own education, Starmer revealed that he had attended a grammar school, which later became a private school while he was still a student there. When confronted with this information, Starmer claimed he didn't even appreciate the privilege of attending a private school. This revelation caused many to view Starmer's position with even more skepticism. The man who now argues that private education is an unfair privilege had himself benefited from a private education, yet he wanted to block other families from having the same opportunity. His actions were seen by many as elitist and hypocritical. He had climbed the social ladder using the very system he now criticized, and once at the top, he seemed eager to pull it up behind him, preventing others from doing the same. It wasn't just about the policy itself. Starmer's actions were viewed as betraying the middle-class families who worked hard and saved money to send their children to small, independent schools. These families were now being punished by Starmer's tax policies, and for many of them, it felt like an unjust attack. What made matters worse was that Labour's tax on private schools was not only unpopular, but some even believed it was illegal. The Independent Schools Council (ISC) had launched a challenge against Labour's VAT policy, arguing that it violated the human rights of children and parents by disrupting their education. Labour MPs themselves were starting to voice concerns about the policy. For example, Ruth Jones, a Labour MP, warned that the policy was too blunt and needed to be reconsidered. She suggested that smaller schools should be exempt from the VAT tax, acknowledging the damage it was already causing. Labour was now in a difficult position. If the legal challenge against the VAT tax succeeded, Starmer would be forced into a humiliating reversal of his position. However, if he refused to back down, the Labour Party risked being responsible for one of the biggest education crises in modern British history. This reality came to a head in Parliament when a Labour MP who had spoken out against the VAT tax policy called on Starmer to reverse his decision. Everyone in the room knew that the MP was right. Starmer's tax on private schools was having a damaging effect on education. Yet, instead of acknowledging the harm his policies were causing, Starmer refused to take responsibility and insisted that his policies weren't the problem. It was in this moment that the full extent of Starmer's political deception was exposed. Even though private schools were closing, fees were rising, and students were being forced out of their classrooms, Starmer continued to deny that his policies were to blame. The situation reached a boiling point when Victoria Atkins, a Conservative MP, stood up and directly accused Starmer of lying. She shouted across the House of Commons that Starmer's statement was a lie. The chamber erupted in response, with MPs from all sides reacting to her bold challenge. Of course, Atkins was required to withdraw her comment, as parliamentary rules do not allow MPs to directly call each other liars. Nevertheless, her words resonated with the rest of Parliament and the public because, in that moment, she was speaking the truth.
I don't doubt the aspirations of all parents in relation to their children. But I mean all parents. What we've been able to do is to make sure we release the funding to ensure that our state secondary schools have the teachers they need. And there's no point the party opposite pretending that they're interested in state education when they left them without the teaching they needed.
Dr. Ray Jake Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Starmer had been caught in a blatant lie. He was trying to gaslight the nation into believing that his policies weren't causing harm, when, in reality, the evidence was all around him. The closure of private schools, the strain on the state education system, the rise in class sizes, and the growing dissatisfaction among parents were all direct consequences of the policy he had put forward. Yet Starmer continued to act as though nothing was wrong, and this was the moment when his credibility began to crumble. It wasn't just a bad day for Starmer, it was a reckoning. His dismissive attitude toward the reality of the situation, coupled with his refusal to accept responsibility for his actions, left many questioning his ability to lead. Starmer's insistence on sticking to his guns, despite overwhelming evidence that his policies were failing, made him appear out of touch with the real struggles facing ordinary families. This wasn't the kind of leadership the British public needed, and Starmer's refusal to adapt or change course seemed to signal a deeper problem.
Hold on. Shh, there is no punchline. I presume something was said that shouldn't have been said. I'm sure the member would like to withdraw what was said, if they've anything about them.
He was more interested in maintaining his political stance than in finding real solutions to the issues that were affecting people's lives. If Starmer doesn't wake up to the reality of the situation soon, this education disaster could end up defining his political legacy. His downfall may come sooner than he realizes, as one thing the British public hates more than incompetence is dishonesty. Starmer has been caught in a lie, and the consequences for thousands of families could be devastating. People are now asking themselves if Starmer has the moral right to remain as Prime Minister. Is he tarnishing the reputation of Britain's leadership by disregarding the oath he took? Does he truly have the best interests of the country at heart, or is he simply protecting his own political career? As the public continues to see through Starmer's hypocrisy, the pressure on him is only going to increase. He may have avoided accountability in Parliament for now, but it's clear that his actions are damaging to the very people he claims to represent. The damage caused by his policies may not be easy to undo, and as more schools close and more families are affected, the public's patience will wear thin. The question is not if Starmer will face consequences, but when those consequences will finally catch up to him.